So maybe for everyone who's joining and watching this on different platforms, we are talking to John Higgins from Flutterflow. Flutterflow is a great place to build modern web apps. He will talk, and mobile apps more specifically as well. And he will talk more about that, give us a quick glimpse into the Flutterflow features. We'll also talk about how Flutterflow works, give us a tour, and then show how we can combine that with FastChat. This is just a very high level overview. We'll also have some more videos coming up that go a bit deeper, and we will also link some videos in the description that give you like a full guide. But without any more preamble, John, do you want to talk for 1 or 2 sentences about yourself and your role at Flutterflow?
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Mike. I'm really happy to be here. I love FastGen, so it's great to be able to collaborate like this. I work as the head of education and training at Flutterflow. So I produce a lot of our training and educational materials and train teams when they need to get up to speed on Flutterflow.
Nice. Okay. And then in your own words, how would you describe Flutterflow to someone who has some technical knowledge, but who hasn't heard of Flutterflow?
Yeah. So Flutterflow is just an app that allows you to build cross-platform native apps. And this would include Android and iOS, but also Mac OS, Linux apps, desktop apps. And these are specifically Flutter apps. So if you have any experience with cross-platform world, Flutter is one of the main cross-platform technologies with a pretty unique software design, because the idea is not that it would produce platform components like UI kit components, but it actually compiles down to machine code. So it will control every pixel in your app. So that's why Flutter apps are known to be very performant. And Flutterflow allows you to build scalable, performant Flutter apps very quickly, very easily.
Got it. And who would you say should use Flutterflow? Like who's the prime user and who should consider Flutterflow?
Yeah, this is most most people, if you need to design an app, Flutterflow is going to be a good option. And I know that's kind of a cop out and kind of a joke in business world, because whenever anyone says who's your target audience and they say everyone, they say okay, let's really figure this out. But really, the reality is, as a visual platform builder, it's really possible for people with just a little bit of design and development experience, all the way up till full teams. So one of our some of our biggest features we've been launching in the past year have to do with collaboration. So we've launched branching and real-time collaboration. We have Teams tools. We have design systems. And so it's really sort of built from the ground up for teams, but there are plenty of individual developers as well. So anytime you need a scalable app, we'd love to be your front-end builder.
Nice. What is it? Create, collaborate, compliance. That's like the ladder you usually go. And you seem to be very well, like on a very good way, like create already done, like Flutterflow can like build like crazy apps. I've seen some of them and like use some of them in production. And seems that like a lot of the focus is on like just collaborating, making sure that multiple members can like work within it, which makes it much more attractive also like for just bigger companies to use it, I assume. And yeah, that sounds like a good intro. Do you want to show us what Flutterflow looks like and give us a quick glimpse?
I would love to, yes. So let me share my screen here. And let's jump over here. And can you see that?
We can see it very well.
Great. Okay, so here we're just at flutterflow.com, and let's jump into a project right here. So here's the builder. We've got all of your widgets. These are the elements that you're going to build your app out over here. and your widget tree. So this is all of the structure of your widgets in your project and your pages.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, on the right side, you've got a contextual menu that has all the properties of whatever you have selected here. So that's the builder itself. If you want to inspect the code at any time, you can just come in here. You can view the code. You can select and it'll pare down. This is one of the sort of unique things about Flutterflow is that we're often sort of grouped into a low code platform, which is, I think, 50% true, but 50% untrue, because often when that term is used, it has to do with low performance or lack of customization. But we're actually trying to do the opposite. So we actually often describe Flutterflow as a developer tool, because all the code is exposed to you. We've got integrations with GitHub, so you can push your code there if you need to add additional features. We have a custom code module over here, so whatever you need, if you need custom logic, if you need custom widgets or just functions, we've got all of that here. We got integration tests for you to run on your project. And most importantly, I think for today, we've got a whole API module set up right here that I just set up some basic user authentication here from FastGen. And do you want to go over this now, or did you have any other questions before we jump into this?
Yeah, two questions. I think number one, the distinction between like low code and not low code and what is it even is interesting, right? Because I hear that a lot when people talk about Flutterflow, that different people use different words to describe it. So maybe like very distinct question. You can definitely use it if you're a full developer, right? Because you can just like use custom code everywhere. But what if you're, let's say, like a designer who's semi-technical or someone else? Would you say that it's still something for them, or would you only recommend I don't like the term, but like, let's say full developers to use Flutterflow?
Yeah, it's really both. If you don't have any development, if you're a designer and you don't have any technical experience, it will take you a little bit of time to get up to speed. And we've produced tons of material to help with that.
Yeah.
So you need some sort of technical understanding of an MVC model and how apps work and how they communicate between different services.
Yeah.
But really, if you've got a 101, 102 level of how modern applications are built, you would be able to jump right in here.
Got it. And then let's switch to the professional level. Because I've talked to a couple of like former, like often Flutter developers, but also other developers who have now like fully shifted towards building within Flutterflow. And I think some of the things you already mentioned, right? You have connection to GitHub, you do have branching, you do have integration tests. But what is it that you would tell someone who has only worked with like fully custom code before? Why should they switch to Flutterflow, and how can it make them faster or more reliable?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a couple things. One is I often like to note that we're already, as modern developers, using visual interfaces. So when you're in VS Code and you press 4 tab, you get this visual interface that pops up of like auto completion, right? And so I like to describe it as, this is really a question of what's the best interface for developing an app, not code or no code or low code, because I think that was a helpful term maybe 10 years ago. But nowadays with apps like FastGen and Flutterflow, it doesn't make sense, largely because these performant apps that we have today are, the real distinctive difference is that they're a low abstraction, right? And so the buttons in the interface correspond one-to-one pretty closely with the underlying code, and you can inspect that all the time. So when you drop in a widget in Flutterflow, let's say a column, when you inspect the code, it's just a Flutter column, right? We're not doing any sort of funny business behind the scene. So really what it is, developers have been using tools, or you can take something like NPM, And that's just something that helps you manage the packages in your project, right? And we all use it because it just helps you develop faster and get to the most important things. The way I like to describe it is that, 80% of your time as a developer is really kind of boilerplate stuff, setting up backend calls, authentication, scaffolding a UI. And so, let Flutterflow, let FastGen take care of a lot of the scaffolding. And then when it comes time to that 20% where you really need high order custom code, it'll give you back that time to really work on that stuff. And so I like to describe it as that 80%, we sort of take care of it and make that really seamless and fast. And then that allows you to get back to that 20% where really the developer shines.
Yeah, like actually that was a very good description, and we use a very similar analogy when we talk about it. Give developers back the time to work on actual like core business logic and focus on what creates the value for your users. But yeah, that was a very quick just interlude just to like talk about a couple of the higher level things. Before we jump into the API calls, can you show us the editor just like in a bit more detail? And show one or two of the tweaks, and then we can jump right into the authentication and APIs.
Definitely. So I just created this page, and I actually did it just this morning from our templates right here. You can generate them with AI or from all of these templates that we have got pre-made. Excuse me. And so I got this interface here. Here's all the widgets that are in here. And it's just basic styling stuff. So when I come over here, I've got my sign up button. I've got all my styling set here. I can use styling for my design system if I had one set up here. I didn't set one up, so I don't have it.
Yeah.
And then when you come over here is where you actually define your logic. So this is actually similar interface to FastGen, right? It's just a node-based editor that is where you define your logic. And so here on our button, and so this is going to be universal to every widget. Because when you want to bind logic to whatever you want to bind logic to, and that's what I like to call describe it as a real low abstraction platform, because this is how you do it in code. You've got a bunch of components, and then they are bound to logic, and that's exactly the way it's done here, just with a visual interface, right? So if you come into this action flow editor right here, you can just see we've got all of our logic defined here. When you select it, you've got all of the specific configurations on the right here.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. So basically you can define the visuals, you can add complex logic on top of it with the node-based action flow editor that you just showed. And now let's talk about how do you get information from other places? How do you connect the APIs, in this case, FastGen?
Yeah. So right now, I wanted to test out some auth here. And it's a credit to FastGen, because I literally did not do it until this morning and was able to set it up in 15 minutes. And so right here, I've got, and for reference here, I was just on the documentation over here for the email-based sign up. And so I got the URL there. Here is all you need to change is that whatever domain your project is in FastGen. We've just got the standard headers right here. And this header, and so this will be good education. Now, let me get this right. For this header right here, this means that the response will be placed in the body and not the header, correct? And so if you just change that to header, then it'll be returned in the header. Is that correct?
Yes.
Beautiful. Okay, so I just got this post request, and here's my body defined right down here. So my body is going to be a JSON body, and I've got these variables right here because, of course, these are going to be dynamic values when the user signs in. It's going to be different users. These are defined over here in our variables. And so we just set those up here, and then those will appear in these variables, and then I just dragged them in here, and that's it. So this JSON body right here, I just grabbed from the documentation right over here. and just replaced those dynamic values. Okay, so that's how you set it up. Then you come over here to our response and test. Let's add a new user in here. We'll say Jill with our password. And when we test our call here, there we go. We get the response with our JSON web tokens and our refresh tokens. And when you, after you get a response back, Flutterflow will automatically detect the most salient JSON paths in the response.
Ooh, nice.
And you can add them in here. And then you just give them a name and then save your call. So I've saved all these here. So I've just given these the names because these are what I'm going to need for our custom auth setup. So it's as easy as that. You just put in the endpoint, you test your call, and then you define your JSON paths that you're going to use in your app. We actually just released custom data types too. And an automatic custom data type detection and creation will be also coming soon. So we'll get a
what
response.
would that add, like the automatic detection?
Yeah, so currently the way it happens is we've got our custom data types over here, and so you would define your data types first, and then you would go back to your response and do the mappings there. Here you would get the response and you would say create custom data type, and it would automatically be created.
Got it. Okay, so basically you were able to set up user auth pretty quickly by just going to the Fastshare documentation, copying it out of there, adding your prefix of your own domain, and adding it to the API call. So now that people can sign up to like the very bare bone app that we have, but sign up would work now, and you would have some kind of authentication for the users.
Exactly. Yeah. Do you want me to show you how the binding in the UI?
Yes, that would be my next question.
Great. Okay, so this is all saved. This call is saved. So I'm going to come into here, and I think one of the beautiful things about a visual interface is that you can just like declarative design today in all of our modern frameworks, where you just kind of define what you want to happen, right? So I think about this and I say, okay, so when the user clicks this button, I want something to happen. So I select the button and I go into this action flow editor because I want to execute some logic, right? So the first thing on the so the triggers will be defined up here. So there'll be normally a couple of different triggers. Normally the default one will be what you want. So just when the user taps it, what do I want to do? I want a backend call. It's that sign up call I have set up. And then here are those two variables that I defined. So the email. And so when I come in here, anytime you see this little orange icon, that has to do with data binding. So I've already got this bound, but let's just come in here. And so you can bind to anything in here, right? And specifically, I want to bind to a widget state, that text field, that text input on my UI. So it'll be under widget state right here. And it's under this sign up email right there. And that's it. And so it's the same thing with a password. I'm just binding to the password field.
Got it. Okay, so basically how it would work in terms of order, you build some kind of UI, then you would want to build the API that executes the logic that you want and the specific data that's coming in. Afterwards, you would go to the actions, map it to the specific UI element you want it to be mapped to, and then you can choose the API that you have built before in the drop-down menu because you see all the APIs there. You just choose the correct one, and then you just map the variables to the actual input that you want it to be mapped to. Was it a correct order?
You're a master. You should be running this.
I don't think so, because the second I have to design the front end, I would have to very, very quickly give it back to you. Okay, but that makes a lot of sense to me. And I think one of the cool things about Flutterflow in combination with Fastshare is just that Flutterflow is so expansive and like you can basically, whatever you think about for your app, you can build within Flutterflow. And like I've mostly been focused on web in the past. I've like dabbled with some mobile stuff. So I have tried out a couple of things and was able to like build some really cool stuff in Flutterflow that I definitely wouldn't have been able to build otherwise that quickly, because I'm just not a mobile dev, right? I'm more of a web person. But then I also have talked to some of my mobile friends who basically build mobile apps all day, and some of them were really big Flutterflow fans because it just makes them faster. So it's just interesting that you have such a like depth of user base, which is a bit similar to what we have with Fastgen as well. We have some people who are just full developers, full stack for like the last 10, 15 years, and they just see the speed up that they can use Fastgen for. And then we have some newer people who, let's say, we call them semi-technical, right? They have some understanding of what's going on, and they use the guardrails that Fastgen provides them to commit fewer mistakes. Because that's one of the great things about having this kind of interface that Flutterflow has or that Fastgen has, that you have some kind of guardrails that basically prevents you from doing some of the mistakes that you might do in deployment, for example, or that you might do if you're not that experienced with code. So basically covering both bases is, I think, something that both Flutterflow and Fastgen combine pretty well.
I love that image of guardrails, because I think as an analogy, like, when you're coding, you'll get errors, right? You'll get squiggly lines.
Yeah.
But once again, it's a question of interface. Is squiggly lines the best way to prevent errors, right? I mean, you could think of all different types of interfaces. And so I think guardrails is great. The other thing that I want to touch on that you said was great, where we have people all range of abilities. What I like about Flutterflow and Fastgen is that it separates the conceptual knowledge from the particularities of language, technology, and platform. Because because before, if you wanted to build an app, you would have to have a real deep knowledge of the concepts of databases and front ends and state. And then you would have to have the knowledge of the implementation in whatever technology you're using in whatever programming languages. And that's an enormous amount of work. But now that this side over here has come way down. So as long as you have a conceptual understanding of how state management work, how you query databases, then these visual interfaces, I think, are actually better suited for actually designing your app. And so it makes it really helpful.
Yeah, that makes sense. So now what we've done is we've added user auth. How does it work with, like, let's say, business logic? Like, does it work the very same way? Would I have to do anything differently in Flutterflow?
No. Yeah. So if we just walk through then, right? So we're calling our Fastgen auth that we have set up. Well, it's automatically set up for you in Fastgen.
Yeah.
Then we just have some utility logic here that automatically set it up. But once again, this all these utility functions, for loops and conditionals, are all editable. This is just a helper we've added in here. So if you don't need it, but we're just checking for if it actually succeeded.
Yeah.
Then once we do this, we're going to start to get into some business logic. So we're just mapping the JSON web tokens here to our authentication in here. So, and this works the same way. So let me just take a step back here. So I'm making this call, and the response is getting dumped into this variable right here, and you can call it whatever you want. I just called it auth response. So then when I come into my auth here, I say, okay, this is great. So and I already have the binding here. I'm coming in here to edit the binding right now if I want to bind it to something else. And what I want is an action output. So each one of these are actions. They're just nodes of logic. And I can see that auth response. That's that variable that we just set up. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to bind it, and I can bind it to whatever in the response. I'm binding it to my JSON body, a specific JSON path. And these were all those paths that I defined. And so I know that's where my token is. And so I confirm it. And so that's getting dumped into our authentication token here. I could do the same thing with my refresh token. And then down here, any additional user information, I'm adding in the email right here, because that's an additional piece of information I'm getting from my user. So now we're authenticated, and once again, you can define any logic you want. So here I'm navigating. If I want any other action, I just set another action and just put anything here. And this is a perfect example here of the sort of like 80-20 that we were talking about before, where 95% of the logic that you're going to need in your app is predefined here. And then for that last bit, you've got custom actions down here where you can define any custom logic.
Mm.
So once again, it just allows you to build a lot faster. So I'm going to delete this action, and I've just got this navigate action where I'm navigating the user to this next page. And once again, this doesn't happen automatically because this is just a visual interface on top of some async await code, right? Like we're just whatever logic you want to run, there it is. So we're not going to automatically send the user anywhere. We're not going to automatically do anything. This is all your logic, whatever you define.
Got it. Okay, so basically now we have them logged in and they get to the homepage where they can actually do what the app is supposed to do.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yep. So, and that's this page here. Welcome.
There we go. Okay, so that was very interesting, and I think hopefully very helpful for the people also who haven't used Flutterflow before, because I definitely know that there's some people in the Fastchain community, but then also for the hackathon specifically, who want to build mobile apps and who were curious about Flutterflow. So I'll just do a large recap and mention a couple of other things. So number one, if you want to build like a mobile app, or like basically any app, but specifically like for mobile, you should take a look at Flutterflow. It goes very far, so you probably won't reach anything that you can do in Flutterflow. Usually you will find a way with the pre-built stuff, but even if there isn't a way, you can just use custom code and extend it. And then on the other side, as John just mentioned, it's very compatible with Fastchain. You can set up user auth apparently in 15 minutes, which is good to hear. And we also have some other additional auth methods that we just launched. If you just don't want email, you can also use Google Login or GitHub or Discord, whatever you please, basically. And then on top of that, you can also like build a lot of client-side logic in Flutterflow. So like things that you want to like happen in the front end, for like lack of a better word. And then on the other side, if you want to like store things in the database, if you want to more like server-side logic and want to like do some heavier computation or something, you can always rely on Fastchain to do it, and then feed that information to Flutterflow by using the external API calls that we just saw. So basically, the cool thing is that the Node editor, or like your action flow editor, and Fastchain, they have a very similar design and like a very similar feel. So if you're familiar with the Flutterflow side of things, then you should be able to jump into Fastchain pretty quickly. And if you understand the Fastchain side of things, you should be able to jump into Flutterflow pretty quickly. And yeah, there's a lot of great Flutterflow content out there. I'll also link a longer tutorial for Flutterflow and Fastchain together in the video description. And we also have some more in-depth tutorials coming up with Flutterflow and Fastchain that we'll post on YouTube and the other platforms soon. And that was like a very long closing statement. But John, did we miss anything? Do you want to give any shout out? Is there anything that you would like to mention?
No, I think that was great. I think that Flutterflow is going to be a great option. You know, it's a bring your own backend platform. So you know, that's one of the things I think that's important here about performance, is that you know, we want to focus on the front end and make that really performant and allow you to bring whatever backend it is that you have, because a lot of times that can be a bottleneck. So we're really laser focused on the front end, and we're glad that you're focused on the back end.
Yeah, it's a made match in heaven.
Yes.
But yeah, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for giving us a little bit of overview of Flutterflow, and especially also helping us out with some of the more conceptual things. I think that will be very helpful for everyone who's watching this on all the different platforms that we're live right now, and also in the VOD afterwards. Thanks so much for your time. I'm very excited to see what people will build with this, and hope you have a good rest of your week.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mike.